Hello and welcome to Politics Today. In this programme today we'll be talking about how Christian freedoms in this country are coming under threat and more importantly how we can defend them. And in today's programme I'm joined by Regan King from Christian Concern. Welcome to the programme. And also Sid Caudle, leader of the Christian People's Alliance. So gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Regan, it's great to have you on Politics Today.
It's great to be here.
It's your first time on the programme. So can you share something about your background and how you came to faith in Jesus Christ and the important work that you're now doing with that great organisation, Christian Concern?
So I grew up in the United States and my father was a pastor. I heard the gospel but didn't really believe it, didn't think it was worth listening to. Perhaps I would have considered myself a Christian, but eventually realized that I needed to be born again and I needed to be right with God because of my own sin against him. So I came to faith at a fairly young age. My father had been involved in some social issues action as a Christian himself. That always inspired me a great deal, and I, as I grew up, desired to in many ways do the same. So some time ago I came into contact with Christian Concern and the important work they do in regards to defending Christian freedoms and in regards to promoting Christian values in British society. Having lived here for about 15 years now, it's great to be working with Christian Concern, seeking to defend Christians who are under attack in the workplace. Also, particularly, my role there involves enlightening people as to what's going on with life issues, so abortion, why life matters, why the laws in our country need to be changed.
Absolutely. And Sid, can you give us an update on what's happening with the Christian People's Alliance?
Well, one of the exciting things that's happening at the moment is that we're moving ahead with a merger with the Christian Party, which will be announced shortly. So we're planning to do the merger after the May local elections because we can't do it before then. And the new party is going to be called the Christian Parties Alliance, so we'll still be CPA. And we've agreed the broad basis for a new constitution. We've basically agreed the basis for a new manifesto, which is on the way, and we've agreed a timescale. They've decided in their wisdom that I should be the interim leader of the new party, and we're planning to have elections then in October for the new party. So that's an exciting development. The Christian Party is strongest in Scotland and Wales, so that we'll be able to cover the whole of the UK far better. And we're still hoping that others will come on board as well, but you'll have to wait for that news.
Fantastic, and really good development, Sid. Well done. Regan, I'll start off with you. You're working with Christian Concern, and Christian Concern really is at the forefront of this battle to defend Christian liberties in the UK. What are some of the major issues that your organisation are working on, and what's some of the cases that are highlighting how Christian freedoms are under threat?
So a case in point regards the fact that since November we have defended 8 street preachers who have in some way come under attack because of the message they've been proclaiming. That's quite common. 8 since November is a fairly normal figure in terms of that month span. Additionally, cases like Felix Ngole, who was kicked off of his university course simply for stating the biblical view of marriage on his private Facebook page. Additionally, we are seeking to defend against calls for buffer zones, against Christians seeking to offer counseling to pregnant women in crisis outside of abortion clinics. And we're asking people if they have had some experience or negative experience inside an abortion clinic, or if they've had a positive experience of counseling outside abortion clinics, to write in so that we can highlight this to the Home Office for their review.
And Sid, as leader of a Christian party, are we having a sense now that our government is in a sense, losing its grip on what's really going on, in terms of knowing that if religious freedoms, and particularly those of Christian freedoms, are under threat in this country, that it can only spell disaster for wider society. So why, for example, has the government, or what is the government doing to protect Christian liberties in this country, particularly in light of these 8 street preachers?
Okay, well, the answer to your question is nothing whatsoever. But what we're seeing now is part of a process that's been going on for some time. And I think it really accelerated with the Incitement to Religious Hatred Act that was brought in, I believe, in 2007, 2008. And at the same sort of time, we're bringing in a whole numerous equality acts. And all these were really aimed at supposedly saying, we want to stop abuses. But in reality, what they were doing was basically attacking Christianity. Because it's interesting, you see, we as Christians are told you have to love your enemies, you do good to those who hate you. If people abuse us, we're kind to them. We don't abuse them back in return. So Christians aren't going to be phoning the police at the drop of a hat every time somebody says something nasty to them. But that's not the same culture within Islam or within the homosexual community. If they're attacked, they're going to fight back, and they're going to phone the police, they're going to call the police, and in some cases we've seen people openly provoked. It's not just a matter of, oh dear, I don't like what this person said, so I'm going to complain. It's a matter of, I'm going to try and get this person to say something for which I can complain. And what we need now is to develop laws that change the whole culture. And I think one of the things for me which is essential that we should do is to challenge people that are complaining to the police falsely. Because it's happened to me, actually. I had a complaint made to the police about something which I'd said, but actually the person that complained to the police then made up a whole load of things which I hadn't said at all. And I had to go to the police and actually prove to the police that this person was lying. And how I did that was basically by saying to them, look, there were 2 people involved. I said, you've taken statements from these 2 people separately. Because they're lying, it's inevitable that they will have contradicted each other. And we looked at the statements, and one of the things that they accused me of doing was using swear language. And I said, I never use this sort of language. This isn't my language. It's obvious that the person who's accused me of this has made it up. But you see, then, okay, the police said, yeah, I accept what you're saying is correct. We can't pursue this case. So my case wasn't pursued. But the people that made the accusation, they should have had some sort of repercussions.
Absolutely.
For lying about what happened. And that's, I think, the next step to protect Christian freedoms that we need.
Absolutely.
In the vast majority of our cases defending street preachers, we see misappropriation of Section 5 of the Public Order Act, which indicates that if you use threatening, abusive, or harassing behavior that could be intimidating to a particular individual, you can come under some legal consequence. However, misappropriation of that is definitely rife when it comes to dealing with street preachers who are telling people about the love of Jesus Christ, who, yes, are warning against the reality of sin and sin's consequence, are calling people to life and help found in Christ alone. The reality of the abuses often stems from misinformation that the police have. They aren't really aware of the ins and outs of the act. Also, sometimes they just don't care, and it's easier to give in to a complainant than to actually allow the street preacher to continue exercising their right to free speech.
Yeah, and Sid, what does this say about justice in our land? If we've seen, for example, in the past year, that 8 street preachers have been arrested, including the recent arrest of David Barker and also Stephen Warren from Camberley in Surrey on the 9th of December, which charges against them has been dropped, and they've been preaching the gospel for 30 years. Really, what does this say about justice in our land when there are crimes that are being committed and these are being ignored, but we're seeing that Christians are being arrested for just sharing the gospel in the streets, which is our religious right and religious duty?
Well, it tells me that something's gone badly wrong and that the law needs to be looked at again and to be changed. It's okay bringing in new laws and saying, okay, we need to protect people and so on and so forth, but then you've got to look and see, okay, how are these laws operating in practice? Because the way they're operating right now is quite clear, is wrong. So changes have got to be made, simple as that.
Yeah. And Regan, taking the case, for example, of David Barker and also Stephen Warren, who were arrested on the 9th of December last year in Camberley in Surrey. Now, surely the police have got more important things to do than to worry about someone preaching in a city centre or a town centre, the gospel, which has been part of this nation's history for the last 1,000 years or so. So why are we seeing such hostility, particularly to Christians just vocaling their faith?
People are offended by the gospel. There's nothing new about that. Jesus said that people would be offended by the gospel. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 speaks of the gospel as an offense. Galatians, 2 Timothy, you can go throughout the scriptures and find numerous passages that indicate the gospel is an offense to people who do not believe. In John 15, Jesus said, do not be surprised when the world hates you. Remember, it hated me first. There's nothing new about that offense that's taken. What the police and other powers that be seem to be forgetting, and including many magistrates who have convicted some of these street preachers, I should add all of them have been acquitted on appeal, is that there is no right to not be offended in our national law. Someone says something, it causes offense. Well, sorry, it's caused offense, but there is not actually a law against saying something that causes offense.
And Sid, don't you think that freedom of speech is under threat here? And then what we have is nothing but, thought police coming in. People are too afraid of speaking up. And we know, for example, in history, what happens when freedoms are taken away and we see an erosion of religious liberty. You only have to look at what's happened to the Jewish community throughout Europe in World War II to understand the consequences of such actions and behaviour. So I'm really saying, essentially, how do we confront this?
Okay, well, I think we need to bring in, as I say, some sort of change in the law. But we're part of, at the moment, part of a process that's actually, for Christians, getting worse and worse. And what we're seeing at the moment with this attack over the rights of people to stand outside abortion centres and hand out leaflets and simply pray in some cases, and saying, okay, we're going to take away those rights. We're going to take away the rights of those people to stand out. This is another new attack which is coming in at the moment. And this is something that we have to resist. So we're no longer talking about the duty of a doctor to make sure that they implement abortion with extreme care. We're now talking about removing the rights of people that are having abortions to know all the facts. We mustn't tell them about adoption. We mustn't tell them about the possible consequences of having an abortion. We mustn't look at the alternatives. Anyone that wants an abortion must be given an abortion, no questions asked, and they just carry out the operation. Now, this is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. And we've got to protect freedom of speech in our nation, because freedom of speech at the moment is under attack. And you could say that, okay, well, when you exercise your freedom of speech, then I'm sorry, I feel offended, I feel abused. I'm sorry, if I'm simply giving you information, if that's all I'm doing, that cannot be an abuse. And at the moment, what these people are doing, standing outside abortion clinics, are only giving people information. There hasn't been one case of an arrest. There hasn't been even a complaint by anybody going into an abortion clinic of being in any way abused. All they've been doing is they're praying for them and handing them leaflets and discussing if they want to discuss, and in some cases giving support, and in some cases there have been people who haven't gone ahead with the abortion who've had some tremendous support from the Good Counselling Network that's been in charge of this process in Ealing. And I think it's essential that we get behind those that are doing what is right and doing what is good and support them wholeheartedly.
Absolutely. And Regan, as an organisation, Christian Concern, is on the front line in defending Christian freedoms in this UK and doing a tremendous job in terms of that. What are the problems that your organisation is encountering, and what sort of level of hatred and opposition are you facing now in trying to establish righteousness in this land and protect Christians?
It's quite evident just from the cases that we receive that there is a great deal of antagonism towards Christianity and towards the gospel, and so by extension there's a great deal of hatred for the work that we do. Sadly, there's a great deal of misunderstanding among Christians as well as to the work we do. A lot of times people will watch the BBC or Sky News and they get the impression that these street preachers were using abusive language and really they're discrediting Christianity, and it serves them right for being imprisoned. It serves them right for being arrested, and hopefully they'll learn a lesson. Personally, I'm not too surprised by, and I'm not bothered by the attacks of those who aren't believers. We're to expect that from the Scriptures, and we have a legal right to defend ourselves in this nation. What is upsetting is when Christians buy the lines of various authorities and just take at face value the accusations that are levied against street preachers and those, as Sid has mentioned, offering information and counsel in a peaceful, compassionate way outside abortion clinics. We at the Christian Legal Center defend street preachers because they have, in the first place, a right to be defended. In the second place, because they are themselves Christians and they are standing up for the gospel. In the third place, we have laws regarding freedom of speech, and that freedom should be defended. In the fourth place, they have not said the things that they're accused of saying. The list goes on. There's a multitude of reasons. As for those standing outside abortion clinics and the opposition that they get, Sid is right. There has not been one documented charge. There's not been any shred of credible evidence that's been exposed regarding those people, particularly of the Good Counsel Network. To the contrary, between 2015 and 2016, there was a massive drop in abortions at that Ealing clinic of over 900. Nationwide, there was a drop of over 1,000. It would seem that the abortion industry is being kicked in a particular way, that they're worried that they're going to be losing money, they're worried that they're losing women's trust, and so they're fighting back.
Sid, there is a great challenge in this country, isn't it, to actually protect Christian freedoms are very much under threat. But isn't one of the biggest problems we're facing is apathy amongst other Christians to realise the true extent of the situation that we face? And so what words of wisdom and encouragement can you have to our viewers to stand up for our Christian values and make our voices heard and known?
Okay, well, I'm a big believer in prayer, and the whole party's a big believer in prayer. We now have a prayer line that goes on every week, as well as spending an hour praying before all our meetings. And I'm quite sure that it's essential that Christians pray for the protection of freedoms. And as demonstrations are taking place, which they do sometimes, I mean, we had a demonstration last November for the anniversary of the 1967 Abortion Act. We need Christians to come out onto the streets. It's interesting, just yesterday in America, they had a big demonstration for life in Washington. Thousands of people were there. President Trump was addressing the demonstration. When we had the memorial of the 1967 Abortion Act in London, there were probably a few hundred people that came. But we need far more. It's time for Christians to get out onto the streets. Because you see, I look and see a demonstration over fox hunting. 500,000 people in London. I see a demonstration over the war in Iraq. 1 million people in London. And I see a Christian demonstration over same-sex marriage, 1,000 or so. A Christian demonstration over abortion, a few hundred. The time has got to come when Christians find their voice and get out into the streets and say, I'm sorry, what is happening here is unacceptable.
And Reagan, I mean, what advice have you got to our viewers, really? Because, I mean, the one thing they can do is support Christian Concern and really value the work that you're doing and you're involved in, and particularly the incredible leadership of Andrea Williams in protecting our freedoms in this country. But isn't one of the issues we have to face really is the issue of apathy and complacency, that many Christians have come to realise that we were a Christian nation, but we no longer are a Christian nation. Sadly, we've moved away from our Judeo-Christian heritage. And isn't it time that we actually fought up and actually defended our values in the public square, as it were?
Absolutely. I believe the issue is two-sided. I think on one side you do have apathy. There's a measure of indifference. People aren't educating themselves. They're not hearing, they're not listening, they're not understanding that Christian freedoms are under attack. And as part of a democracy, we have the right and responsibility really to stand up for those freedoms, for the right, particularly to freedom of speech. On the other hand, you have people who aren't apathetic, but they're equally unhelpful in being overly pessimistic and cynical. And the mindset of, well, it's anything we say, anything we do isn't going to work, anything we say, anything we do is just going to fall on deaf ears. We have to avoid that, and we have to approach things understanding that regardless of whether we will be accepted or not, or whether our witness will be appreciated initially or not, we are called to be the light to the world. We are called to be the salt of the earth, and we are called to make a difference, and that means involving ourselves in the political and legal spheres. It means responding to things like the abortion clinic protest review that the Home Office is undergoing at the moment. It means standing up and being counted as followers of Jesus Christ in a very public way. That's what's needed. That's what Christians need to be doing in order to be the light of the world in a practical way.
Absolutely. And Sid, I mean, you're involved in the front line of politics, so it's the nature of yourself and also your party to defend Christian values. But how important is it that people get involved in the political process to defend our Christian values, and that just voting for a political party or political candidate is not enough to guarantee our freedoms in this country?
No, exactly. It's very important. I mean, we're talking about writing letters to MPs, and you see, and when people write to MPs, if an MP gets 15 letters on one issue, they suddenly think, oh, I'm getting a lot of letters on this one issue. And every member of Parliament has to respond to a letter which they get from somebody who lives in their constituency. So it's important now. Well, we've got consultations taking place on buffer zones, we've got consultations taking place on other issues. It's very important that people write to their MP, take part in the consultation. And also, as I was saying earlier, get out into the streets as well. You see, what Reagan has said is absolutely right, because we can win sometimes. You know, we don't always lose. We won on assisted dying. You know, we were out there in the streets. We were out there campaigning. We got the message over to members of Parliament. And at the end of the day, the message came back, assisted dying has been defeated by over 300 votes. But I've also had a message back saying that those that support assisted dying are still pushing it. They're still pushing it with new MPs. They're trying to get another vote. They haven't given up. We have to have that same persistency that says we're not going to give up either. We're going to keep going because these issues are of extreme importance.
Ephesians 6 says, "Be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might, and having done all, to stand firm." And it can be very wearying. It can be quite exhausting to keep on, and we can get a bit down and depressed by it. But exactly what Sid has indicated, we have to stand firm. We have to hold the line. And that's something that we've often been all too quick to give up on.
And Reagan, how can our viewers get to know the work of Christian Concern, and so that you can educate Christians to realise the areas where Christians are under threat and where Christian liberties are threatened?
Well, most viewers, I'm sure, have a computer. Just go on Google and type in Christian Concern and find our website. Email us at info@christianconcern.com and request to be added to our weekly newsletter we send out, news relevant for Christians on social issues, comment pieces every week on Friday evenings, and seek to actually get to grips with what's happening in our nation from a particular Christian perspective. If you are particularly interested in the life-related issues, some of what we've been talking about, you can email me directly, reagan.king@christianconcern.com, and we can arrange to meet up, or we can arrange to have a discussion as to what we are doing, particularly in regards to defending the right to life of the preborn child.
Absolutely. And sadly, social media is becoming a real menace in our time, where, many Christians feel discrimination for something that they might post on social media, such as Facebook or something. What words of wisdom can you give our viewers to have confidence to stand up for their Christian convictions and to stand up for what is righteous and what is right?
Well, I always try and make sure that anything I say, I've got evidence for. And I think that's very, very important. So if you're posting anything on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, if you're saying something, make sure you don't say something which is just simply an opinion which you can't back up. And sometimes before you actually do a post, just say, well, I'm just going to check this. I'm going to just check these facts, and just think in your head, if somebody challenges what I'm saying, what would I say? What would I say in response? Can I justify what I'm saying? Because that's important. It's important, if you like, because we as Christians want to always make sure we're speaking the truth. So we have to be whiter than white. We have to make sure when we're posting things that what we're saying is absolutely true, and we're not leaving any possibility of somebody coming and attacking us from the back door. But I like social media. I mean, we have a Facebook site that has posts going up every day. We have a lot of engagement, as well as having engagement with Twitter. And I think it's very useful. And one of the interesting things is that there's people all over the world, in countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, that don't have freedoms, that can have access to some of the things going up on the internet. So think of it positively, don't think of it negatively.
And Reagan, what advice have you got for any street preachers that want to take to our town centres and city town centres and just want to preach the gospel? How can they protect themselves against any such arrests and attacks?
First of all, it's important to ensure that the zone that you're preaching in is a place where you're allowed to be. There are certain areas that are private property, and it's right to respect the private property. If you're informed that you are on private property and asked to relocate across the street, well, you may not appreciate that. It's the right thing to do and shows respect, and you'll have generally a friendly and good response from the police who are speaking to you in that instance. Also, in preaching, it's good to remember that you don't always have to answer a heckler. You don't always have to answer someone who is throwing abuse. Don't answer a fool according to his folly, the scriptures say.
Reagan, and also said thank you so much for being my guest on Politics Today.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you for watching today's programme. It's important as Christians that we make our voices known, that we stand up for righteousness, and we proclaim the truth, because our freedoms are under threat. So thank you for watching Politics Today.